In the space between the living and the dead dwells the Banshee, a singular spectre seen by countless people over hundreds of years. Her appearance is never welcome. But what is she? A ghost? A demon or bizarre biped creature? Some believe she comes from the realm of dark fae. Well, we may not know exactly what she is, but we know exactly what she does. Banshee is a harbinger of death. And what's more, if she has a connection to your family, she will follow you no matter where you go. This personal experience of the Banshee comes from Eileen, a subscriber to the channel from the US. I remember it clearly. My aunt was suffering from breast cancer at just 39, and my mum, who was a nurse, was caring for her. My grandfather, their father, was living with us at the time, and for some reason he and I were at our house when Mum and Dad were at my aunt's place. I suspect it's because nobody expected my aunt to die so suddenly. Well, the other kids were out in the street playing ball in the hot summer sun, but Grandpa and I were together in the shadowy house. I was drawing on the old coffee table. It was really quiet. I remember that clearly, and my grandpa was sitting in my dad's comfortable chair doing a crossword puzzle in the daily paper. We'd been listening to the shrill voices of the neighbourhood kids all morning, but it seemed that they'd moved farther down the street because I remember a hushed kind of strange silence before it happened. Suddenly I heard a sound I still can't really describe. It was a keening. Yeah, but the most beautiful, hair-lifting cry I think I'll ever hear. It was outside and up, as if it hovered high over the front porch. I looked up. My grandpa froze where he sat. Slowly, he set down his newspaper and rose, pausing as if by dragging his feet he could prevent the inevitable. Then he walked to the front window and pulled the curtains aside. The keening began again, like a high wind, or one of the old ladies who showed up at family funerals, except it was indescribably more beautiful and haunting. Well, I sat where I was, suddenly unsure what to do. But my grandpa knew. He looked outside, then tipped his head to look up, as if at something hovering in the bright white sky. "She's gone," he said, and there were tears in his voice. Quietly he let the curtains fall back into place, and for a while just stood there with his head down. "What was that, Grandpa?" I asked. He shook his head, never looking at me. It was the Banshee. He walked back to his chair and sat down. He picked the paper up that he'd carefully folded, but he didn't look at it. He just held it. I looked out toward where the voice had come from. I knew what banshees were. I'd just seen the film Darby O'Gill and the Little People not long before, and the Banshee in the movie was a terrifying swirl of flowing black robes and hair, and her voice had been terrifying. But this hadn't terrified me. Even so, I didn't have the courage to get up and walk to the window to look out. I just went back to colouring. And just then, my mum called. My aunt had just died. My mother didn't seem surprised that my grandpa already knew. Well, my grandpa said to me it was pointless to tell anyone, as he thought no one respected the old ways or even recognised them in the US. I never asked my mother about what I heard and didn't tell anybody until about 10 years ago, when I finally discovered the Irish part of our family who had been able to stay in Ireland. And when I asked my Irish cousin about our visit from the Banshee, she said, "Of course, The Banshee follows our clan. Banshee doesn't bring or cause the death, but her visit warns loved ones that a death is near, and it gives them a chance to prepare. Her wail is unlike any other noise on earth, and difficult for those who have heard it to describe. But those who have tried say her voice is ragged, shredded, painful to hear. Her wail is long, without need to pause for breath, high-pitched and wild. It gradually ascends from a guttural moan and is pierced with screams as she stretches her neck long and bends her head backwards. Some say her wail is so horrible it can curdle the blood, or even stop a weak human heart. And Banshee works in mysterious ways. I have another personal experience sent to me from a subscriber. Joe kindly shared the story of his parents' ill-fated move to the US from Ireland. Bridie McManus was my mother, and she was as sensible as the day is long. She told me this tale not long before she passed in 1992. Well, in around 1920, my parents, Bridie and Donald, were both in their early 20s and not long married. Donald had an uncle, his mother's brother, there in Chicago, who promised him work and a place to stay until they got themselves settled, and I suppose it seemed like a great offer in the day. Donald and Bridie bid a warm farewell to both their families and emigrated from Kilkenny to Chicago, in search of prosperity and adventure, I suppose. And so it was adventure they found, only not in the shape that they dreamed of. The night it happened was only weeks after arriving in Chicago. Donald and Bridie were asleep in the attic room of their uncle's house, enjoying the deep sleep reserved for those with a clear conscience, my mother would say. Bridie woke first. She heard 3 distinctive knocks at the attic window. An impossibility, sure, and yet she swore it were true. So Bridie heard 3 knocks and sat up to see her there. Sat at the end of their bed, smiling silently, was Donald's own mother, Mary. She said there was nothing unnatural to her appearance. She looked altogether familiar. Her Sunday shawl was wrapped around her shoulders, her hair was curled, and her hands rested softly in her lap. Well, Bridie shook Donald to wake, and they both sat up and looked upon the vision of Mary, sitting with the grace that she was known for, and smiling, just smiling. It was Donald that spoke, and this is what he said. "Mother dear, why have you come? What have you to tell me?" But Mary didn't answer. She tilted her head a little and smiled warmly, then disappeared from before their eyes. Donald and Bridie both swore they felt a weight lift from the bed as she disappeared. Well, there was no more sleep to be had that night, and no drop of whiskey or pot of tea could settle their agitation. So Donald and Bridie dressed and waited, pacing the floor or gazing out the attic window. When dawn arrived, Donald told his uncle of the apparition, and as Donald spoke, the breath in Uncle's chest tightened and he fell pale. "'Tis the Banshee," he said. "She has followed our kin across the sea. Didn't the very same thing happen to my cousin there in Boston?" Donald rushed to the nearby church rectory. Very few people had a telephone of their own in the day, so, as was the way of things, though it may seem strange, he turned to the church for help. Well, Donald used the church telephone to call the telephone in the church at Kilkenny and heard the news that he dreaded. His mother had passed on only hours before. It was sudden and, they said, painless. She'd been as strong as an ox until the minute she died. Donald was terribly shaken. He returned to his uncle's house and said, "She came for to say goodbye." Well, emigration may have promised Donald and Bridie a heavy purse, but aren't some things more important anyway? That very day, they left Chicago for New York and the first voyage home, and they were never visited by the Banshee again. Would we even recognise a Banshee if we saw one? Well, witnesses to Banshees say she is solid in body, not ghost-like, but her appearance varies wildly. She's been described as an old woman dressed in black with long grey hair and covering her face with a veil, or as a deathly pale woman with long red hair and wearing a shredded dress, or even as a beautiful woman with silver white hair wearing a shimmering dress and carrying or using a silver comb. But she's also been seen as a headless woman, naked from the waist up and carrying a bowl of blood. Well, no matter her age, her hair, her clothing, or her voice, there is one thing consistent in every description of Banshee, and that is her eyes are red and sore from crying. It's a strange world. Until next time, keep your eyes and ears open. Cheerio!